Alright, in this video we'll compare the cash conversion cycle for McDonald's and Johnson Johnson. The cash conversion cycle measures the amount of time money is tied up in working capital in the firm. There's three ratios that go into it. The days of inventory, and that's the inventory conversion period, how long it takes on average between when the firm buys stuff and puts it in inventory and when they sell it. Add to that the days of receivables. When they sell it for credit. They take an IOU, an accounts receivable, as opposed to cash on the barrelhead. So adding these two together gives you the operating cycle. Days of inventory, how long it's on the shelf. Days of receivables, how long it's sitting in somebody's inbox before they actually pay it. Now, operating cycle is how long it takes the firm between when they buy stuff and when they're actually paid for it, but that's offset by the days of accounts payable. When the firm buys inventory, they don't pay cash for it, they give somebody else an IOU. So with McDonald's, accounts payable is somebody else's accounts receivable. In any account, the days of payables means that when you bought the stuff, you didn't pay cash for it either. So it offsets the operating cycle. The cash conversion cycle is days of inventory plus days of receivables minus the days of payables. And looking at McDonald's here, the inventory, which we got from the financial statement, the inventory assets, $59 million, they don't have a whole lot of inventory. The accounts receivable, about $1.5 billion net receivables. The accounts payable, about $750 million accounts payable. To get 1 day's sales, take the annual sales of $24,622,000 and divide by 365. That gives you $67 million a day times 365 will give you the annual sales. The days of cost of goods sold, take the cost of goods sold of $14,417,000, divide by 365, and you got $39 million a day. All right, so 1 day's sales, annual sales divided by 365, 1 day's cost of goods sold, annual cost of goods sold divided by 365. By the way, if you're working with quarterly financial statements, we're using annual, but if you're using quarterlies, you have to divide these by 90 or 91 to convert the 90 days worth of sales into 1 day's worth of sales. Alright, so working with quarterly a little bit more complex, but the calculation's the same after that. Days of inventory will be inventory divided by 1 day's cost of goods sold. And takes about a day and a half. Stuff sits in inventory on average. McDonald's just doesn't carry a lot of inventory. Now, that's the McDonald's Corporation doesn't carry the inventory. That's not necessarily the McDonald's franchises, because those are separate from McDonald's. McDonald's sells to the franchises. The franchises, to the extent they're independently owned and operated, they're a separate business. They're not McDonald's itself. McDonald's Corporation is the franchisor. The franchisees are probably independents, or mostly independents, I should say. All right, days of receivables. That's when somebody owes McDonald's money and McDonald's hadn't collected it yet. Take how much they sell per day, and accounts receivable divided by how much they sell per day is how many days it takes on average to get to actually receive the money from an accounts receivable. And it's about 3 weeks. So add those two together, day and a half in inventory, 21.9 days in accounts receivable. You got about 23.3 days in the operating cycle. Now, if you take accounts payable and divide that by 1 day's cost of goods sold, that's how long money is tied up in accounts payable. So what that means is McDonald's doesn't have a whole lot of money tied up in its working capital. All right, and it actually was negative in these days. That means that they collected the money from a sale in roughly 20.9 days, but didn't have to pay for the stuff that they sold for 24.9 days. So they had 4 days free use of the money. that's a good thing. The lower this number and the negativer it is, it's actually better for the firm from a cash management standpoint. All right, there's other things that come up with respect to risk, but that's actually a good number. Now compare that with Johnson and Johnson. Johnson and Johnson has inventory. That's what, 4 months worth of inventory. McDonald's, not so much. Even if McDonald's owned all the restaurants, you can't leave hamburgers on the shelf for 4 months. Days of receivables, that's about 2 months worth of receivables. That's a lot of receivables. So their operating cycle is over 6 months long and has actually increased somewhat over the last 5 years, from 187 days to 196 days. They've added roughly a week to their operating cycle. Offsetting that is their days of payables. They don't have to pay stuff that quickly. But still, you can see that they have nearly 3 months worth of cash tied up in working capital. That's a lot of cash being tied up, and that has to be financed some way or another. All right, so the accounts payable is one method of helping to finance the working capital here, but if this isn't enough, then what they have to do is borrow money or raise money from shareholders and use that to help pay for the lag in time between when they are actually paid when they make a sale and or to help pay for leaving inventory sitting on the shelves. So that's pretty long relative to McDonald's. All right, McDonald's cash conversion cycle is essentially 0, and J&J's is roughly 3 months. So a big difference between the two. That ain't necessarily good or bad. It's different.